I live in East Callis, before that I lived in Burlington and Newport. And let's see, most of my work experience has been in public libraries and under the Vermont Judiciary at the Washington Superior Court most recently. And I'm also expecting a baby in late June, early July, so I'm hoping this session wraps up.
Me too. You're not
We
alone.
will have scheduled breaks.
And we might have
Or
some yoga
not
balls in
objective.
here.
Might have unscheduled breaks.
Okay, I've just been chair training and told that my opening speech to you is of utmost importance. But most of you have been here before. I tend to run a committee as informally as I can and maintain order. I don't expect you to ask for permission to speak. Generally, you can nod, raise your hand if you have a question for a witness, and I'll nod or say your name. I don't expect to be called Madam Chair or anything. I probably draw the line at AU. But as long as things are said respectfully, I'm not a stickler. If two things, and I always say this, I don't like surprises. So if you're going to introduce a bill or an amendment, or, if you're going to vote against the bill, I try and give you, plenty of time to say that in committee, but just let me know. Or if you change your mind on the floor, let me know. I expect that witnesses will be treated with respect. You don't have to like what they say, and you can ask questions, but things should be done respectfully. They have a right to be heard, and their issues have a right to be considered. There was a time when we had a large thing of gum on this table so that one could work. We had at least one witness that set some people off, and you could chew gum. Take your angst out on the witness. We can do that again. But I think treating people with respect is the thing I expect most. I'm a former mayor. We start on time because in local government, they tar and feather you if you don't show up on time. We start at 1:30, except when we're on the floor, and then I'll tell you in the announcements, we frequently have to rearrange, and that's where I'll be depending on Jill to move witnesses around. I'm going, unless somebody objects, try and keep this room as only committee as possible, as fewer occupants. As far as I'm concerned, the lawyers, we just need them to sit here and listen and be available. If we have a question, they can do that on that screen. I'm anticipating, since I keep hearing that New England is seeing an uptick in COVID, one of the bivalents, that will hit us at some point, and I'm going to do as much precaution as I can. Last year we wore masks, but the State House rule is we have to if it's above green. We're still in green, but anyone feel free to wear a mask. There's hand sanitizer. If you don't feel well, stay home. Usual things. I don't know, we've been talking a lot about managing workload. The workload is, right now, we will be fairly quiet because bills tend to come to us last unless they're just a blatant rewrite of the tax code. And then revenue bills traditionally start in the House. So I've told DFR that they have a housekeeping bill every year for insurance. They have been very good about keeping it to housekeeping. There's usually a captive bill, which is frequently to housekeeping. We usually switch them around on workload, depending on when they have them ready, but they have all new deputies and a new commissioner, and so they're getting their act together over there right now. Next week, I have scheduled 101s. Friday, we still don't have anybody. I do try and get you out around 3:30 on Fridays, especially in the bad weather, and knowing at the end of the session, the end of May, or the end of April, appropriations and finance tend to get deluged, because any bill that anybody's been sitting on to a deadline or crossover, most of them, if they do anything with money, goes to one of us. Frequently, they go to both of us, so.
Third trimester issue.
Yes, it is. And we, so we have to work some hours. We don't usually have the luxury of,
This is one of the committee rooms that actually does need lights.
yes,
Right.
yes, we do have to have them on at times. I think that's it. My goal, I think this committee has only had one bill returned to it as not ready for prime time. That was a constituent service bill as a favor to one of the committee members. I will never do that again. My goal is to bring the bills out, especially money bills, with a unanimous vote. Can't always do that, but try, because when we go to the floor, they tend to be long and complicated, and people need to know that the issues have been dealt with in here and that this is okay. And I always want to be prepared for the floor. I'm watching how live streaming is going to impact that, because sometimes it means you need to raise issues that might not be popular. But if you don't raise them in committee and you get to the floor and they get raised, and Russ Ingles brought that up in the chairs meeting today, and Russ is always the one I expect to stand up and ask me the question or Benny that we hadn't thought about. And you don't want to have that happen. And I've always remember watching a bill about demonstrations in front of the State House needing to get a permit so they could make sure they had porta potties. And that brought up a whole First Amendment issue, and the committee hadn't thought about that. Not a good place to be. So any issue, bring it up. Senator McDonald and I don't figure out a way to beat the system, make sure that it comes up. Senator Gray.
Well, some of this is, and I think people are quite good at it in general, but it helps a lot as a collegial, small sense, that when people have questions that don't need to be brought up on the floor, and it's only a second reading, they can just go to the person and ask. Sometimes you want to lay down a public marker that this question's pending. Other times you can just go to the person and say, oh, well, that doesn't seem so great. Maybe we need an amendment before 35. Once in a while, people get tempted into, I don't know, it feels, occasionally it can feel like an unnecessary interrogation.
And we don't always get the most controversial bills. Sometimes miscellaneous tax gets some interesting things tacked onto it, because that is our Christmas tree. That is where we hang everything that has ever been done.
Can we do break open tickets this session?
Go ahead, introduce. I think that goes, I think we
I
did
was
break
looking
open
at my-
tickets.
yeah, exactly.
There
What about break-open tickets?
we go.
Was it like a
I'm
fire?
already getting the
sale?
message that mini tips are coming back. So, yeah, and there's a long history of having several members on this committee on natural resources and on economic development. And when bills come here from any of those committees, unless there is a huge amount of public brouhaha about you missed this or leadership is doing something, I really do try and hold our focus and our discussion to the things in our jurisdiction, which is frequently taxes, fees. I learned that when Senator Aluzzi was sending me bills, because if you messed with Vince's bills, you paid the price. And my first year with Vince, before I'd done anything to upset him, $13 million for the Montpelier water filtration plant disappeared in the capital bill. He said he'd put it back.
It's a
on the floor.
purification issue.
Purification, yeah.
But he knew we could find another way to pay for it. That was my introduction to Senator Lucy. So, yeah, even as lowly freshman watches. I think that's it. Talk to me anytime. I think Senator McCormick.
First of all, I want to say how good it is to be back on this committee. I not only have served in this committee in the past, I've served with several members of the committee. It's interesting to see you still here. Madam Chair, would you go, and I called you Madam Chair, would you kind of go over that this committee has jurisdiction over utilities?
Yes.
Natural resources and energy has jurisdiction over energy. Now,
So they set energy policy, but if it requires that a utility buys something, it gets a little fuzzy and gray in that transition. But anything like tax subsidies for renewables, net metering, anything that impacts the electric bills usually shows up here. But some of that is the call of the Secretary of the Senate or leadership as to where they direct bills. I've never asked for one. And some of them, they'll say, do you want it? It could come here.
That's usually a hint you don't.
I wasn't sure about the bottle bill, but it worked well. We took it in and we kicked it
that's the
out.
revenues of the state.
Yeah, because it was raising money.
What about the arrangements between people with solar on their roofs? And
That's all,
That's ours, isn't
that's all the net metering fees pays, that has traditionally come here. I got recognized many years ago by Renewable Energy as, the legislator, and I said, what did I do? He said, you passed 5 net metering bills in 3 days. I said, no, I probably did. But that's when it was new. And, we were doing methane digesters. And so that all came here. But then, when I wasn't here, that's when the cutbacks came. Because we're always walking the balance between trying to keep electricity affordable and electricity, and yet have more of it. And I think if we learned anything last week, and I don't know who's it's going to, but if we all depend on one electric source and there is an ice storm and it goes down, what do? There were a lot of people getting cold on Christmas Eve. And that wasn't anywhere near the ice storm they had.
98.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Quebec after that. It looked like Godzilla had been through those high power lines. They were just bent in half, so. And the other one is, and I'm hoping you'll do it, is how much do we need to be totally renewable? I'm thinking, because I think our next, not in my backyard, may turn out to be solar fields or windmills. We've already seen some.
Well, so we, Senator McCormick's broached the subject. We talked about it briefly this morning. The Senate rules around what we do on energy are so terse that it's a little vague. And we thought about rewriting to make it
Yeah.
more explicit. And so if you're game, I would, and actually I said I would consult with you as we did that,
Okay.
to try to make sure that the gears fit together smoothly as opposed to sometimes jamming together or leaving it ambiguous in a way that's just not helpful to either committee. And so,
I think when that got written, energy wasn't the issue it is now. And there is only one regulated utility. There's lots of energy sources, so I think, yeah, clarity would always be helpful.
so as we work, I'll bring our work over here and we can line up the two Senate rules where it specifies jurisdiction and maybe there's, I don't know if there's editing just on our side or we would look and say, oh, you know, it would be helpful to make them dovetail better, to
Yeah,
make a change on this side as well. I don't know.
talk to leadership. Yeah, I'm sure it will work somehow. This year, I have a feeling our focus is going to be on a lot of the issues that are out there in our big focus, childcare, family leave, everything I've seen involves some tax fee, something. They're all gonna end here. I think the policy is gonna be a lot easier to put together than the payment. And we will be having a joint meeting. The RAND study is going to be introduced and released to the public on the 17th. They've been fine tuning it.
So new one?
Yeah, it was just finished up. I was on I did 2 Zoom meetings as a stakeholder.
Sorry, what's the, what?
The RAND,
I didn't follow that.
they were charged, and it didn't go through here, it came out of health and welfare with doing a study to let us know what it would cost to do childcare. And there's lots of levers. Building Bright Futures is definitely as the Cadillac model probably, and the bill for that is somewhere around $400 million. The RAND's numbers are significantly less, but that's additional dollars, not the dollars that are already in there. It's significantly less, but it is still a huge number. And so the concern has been, to me, we asked, what would it cost? Okay, that's what it's gonna cost. So what this committee's gonna have to look at is how to, what's a reasonable cost? Is there a reasonable cost? How do we phase it in? How do we pay for it? What's it gonna look like and what can we afford to do? That's gonna be here. If paid family leave makes it through, it's gonna be the same thing. Those will probably be the really big issues that I know of. I'm quite sure there will be a going to an income tax for education to come through here. And there will be a divide up the non-homestead property and charge a different rate between commercial and second home residential, non-primary residents. So we'll be looking at all of those. Those are the ones I think are coming through, but I think they're enough to keep us busy. Yeah.
Do you know, or maybe this is an economic development question, is there a study similar to the RAND study on childcare for paid family leave?
I haven't heard of them. Can you know?
There's not one that we commissioned. What I can say is that JFO has purchased contract for a lot of modeling around paid family leave. So they can get us a lot of data we didn't have before on costs of 6 weeks of one type of leave or 12 weeks of another. And they have also been following, Maine did a very comprehensive study called the McMillian study that advocated for a graduated rate where lower income families would get more dollars of their, of their wage, more higher percentage of their wage. And so it would equalize out the equity of the benefit essentially. So we're going to look at the Maine study so we don't have to reinvent the wheel because there's a lot of similarities, and JFO is really familiar with Maine's model and their own software that is going to help us with a lot of number crunching.
And they did have a number for payroll tax.
Yes.
Everything on a payroll tax.
Right.
So.
And again, a Cadillac model
A
where
Cadillac model.
every
and
type of leave, which we're going to have to.
We're gonna have to sit down, and I'm sure we won't all agree on what's affordable, but hopefully we can find something that I think everybody understands that childcare is a necessity.
Mhm.
If people are gonna work and we need workers, we need to have reliable childcare.
Mhm.
And so that starts us on some level ground,
Mhm.
which is fairly new since the pandemic. But then we get into, and so what can we do about it?
Right. And the only way in which our hand is a bit forced on paid family leave in a more imminent sense is, and I don't know if this is solely an appropriations question that comes from economic development, is to look at the governor's plan and the 2 million that he's asking for to start his proposal, and to see where we stand by the end of session on how that $2 million is spent and how the contract unfolds. So that may or may not come to this.
Yeah,
as well.
this insurance committee, my
That's right,
concern is
thank
if
you.
it's a voluntary program,
Right,
are they gonna get a big enough pool? Or is
exactly.
it being merged with another pool in Hartford? We will be getting from DFR, along with housekeeping, and they weren't sure, and I suggest they do separate it out, will be a money transfer bill, which we standardly do, I think, of Western Union. But this is all the new online money transfer systems, and among those is Bitcoin. So some things have happened to Bitcoin recently, so they're gonna come in, their banking department, with some departures from the model rule that came out maybe 6 months ago.
Right.
So they're still working on that, but we will get to play with Bitcoin. And those are the two I know are coming. There will be a captive housekeeping bill. Next week, I've asked to have them do, I think we all understand life insurance and, health insurance. I haven't gotten anything lined up yet. I will be sponsoring a merged market bill, which, if anyone remembers last year, this is for the Obamacare Affordable Care Act, Vermont health insurance. And for years, we have an issue with a very small individual market, people who buy their own insurance, but they tend to have some pretty serious health issues and they are expensive. On their own, their health insurance has been basically unaffordable. We have merged them for years with the small group market, which are your small employers. Up until Obamacare did an association, the Chamber of Commerce was everybody joined in the chamber, had health insurance you could sign up for. Obamacare did away with it. the Trump administration said they could do it, and you could be in an association with anybody from here to, you know, California. We were really struggling with that because the small businesses were, many of them were able to afford health insurance for the first time for their employees. And then the Trump administration changed its mind and said, you can't do it. Which led me to take a very deep breath because it's a very hard decision. 2 years ago, the federal government, I think with COVID, put in a large number of subsidies into that individual market insurance, which allowed us to separate the markets, to keep the subsidies, kept the insurance for individuals in an affordable range, and it saved the small group, I think it was $1.5 million to a small number, saved them a lot of money. So, in premiums. So last year it came back, the feds had not extended them. Everybody thought they would, but they couldn't get their act together. And when we went home, they had not extended the premiums. We extended the separated markets for a year. Feds have now extended those premiums for 5 years, and so the bill will just say, we'll keep them separated for 5 years, and then hopefully the feds will see what a wonderful thing it is and keep doing it, or enough people will be hurt by them undoing it, that it'll stay. But that's a housekeeping bill. That's just, but if you're new and you weren't part of that, they've been very painful discussions. You were looking for?
Senator Hardy.
No, she is diagonally across the hall in government ops. She used to be in here.
Oh, thank you.
So that's what I can remember. Questions? Anybody else have bills you want to have taken up or that will come here? As they come in, we will try and have either Ledge Council or the sponsor come in, or both, and tell us what the bill is, why they put it in. That way we have a little more in depth as to what it is, and we will then, as a group, decide what we're gonna take up. I don't play the game of, I'm just not taking, at least I haven't yet. I will never say never.
Chair's
but
prerogative, right? We
The
just
chairs,
learned
we
about
learned about, I didn't know that.
that.
I didn't know that was a rule.
At the training, they had like tools in the toolkit of
Yeah.
committee chair, and the first one was chair's prerogative. It's like, we're all like, what is that?
I thought that
Just
was the
that.
call of break before we came to fisticuffs.
You know, I misunderstood what you said. I thought you said chair speedometer.
That too.
made sense to me.
How fast they go. Yeah. We had one on Secretary Bloomer, it'd be pegged to the top. He goes very fast.
Chairs used to decide whether or not smoking was permitted in the committee room.
Well, of course, they took that away from me. I did tell, yeah, I'm gonna try and keep this room as empty as possible. I know witnesses, when they're on different sides, tend to feel that if one's up and one's in person, it's difficult. So, you know, they can both be on the screen or they can both come in, that's up to them, but I don't see any value to having joint fiscal and ledge council just sit here on the hard chairs for 3 and 4 and 5 hours just to listen. They can sit in their comfortable office and listen to the same testimony, and we can ask them questions. They're up there, you know, we can make them appear like a genie if we want. So,
I have another question.
Yeah.
Since we have half of the Economic Development Committee, just thinking about workflow on larger, more controversial bills, with paid family leave, do you know if it's originating in the House or the Senate?
If I had to hazard a guess right now, I'm looking at the live button. My guess would be the House, simply because they seem to have mentally charted a path, from my understanding, for both childcare and paid family leave to be considered simultaneously. And our leadership is anticipating receiving their thinking. I don't know if that's too opaque, but
No, I just wondered if they're starting, then there's crossover.
yeah, we'll
Okay.
keep in close touch. I do think the understanding I have right now is that we'd start by looking at the governor's proposal and getting the administration in on what the governor's voluntary plan looks like, and let them look simultaneously if they want to. I deal with childcare.
Yeah, I think, just to me, if we're being asked to fund
Right.
hundreds of millions of dollars, to have them moving separately would not be the most efficient way,
Mhm.
because then you've got something here, but what you do with your funding here depends on what happens to the funding there. So I hope wherever, my impression this morning was that everybody seemed to be assuming the House would be starting.
Yeah.
Which means we are going to have a doubly heavy end of the year unless everything dies before it gets here.
Right.
Well, presumably, if the House is going to start first, since the House revenue bills typically would start in the House, and those are things that are going to demand huge revenues if they go forward, that it would be good to have the House do the revenue piece as well. So
And then we could cut it, and we could say, but we cut taxes.
we can eliminate it. Look at the money we're saving.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be an interesting discussion, because they are all good things, but they cost money, or we would have done them before, and we will do that.
Not to go too far into policy, but I can, one interesting and sort of troubling question that was raised for me right away is, in the state, so few people have a well-defined benefits package. So to enhance the benefit package of people who already have something, when there's so many people who have none, and the burden, the cost of that package will be spread over people who have none, it's always, we end up with this tension between wanting to do something helpful, but people who have the hardest time paying for things are sometimes drawn into paying for
Right,
it.
and
when
they
they don't.
can't afford to take it. That's what happened last time. The argument was, well, you're going to be taxing all these minimum wage people, but if you're only getting 2/3 of your salary for 6 weeks, you're having a hard time living on full salary. You can't afford to buy, to buy diapers and live on 2/3 of your salary and still pay your rent. So Senator Kitchell has been very clear about that. And yeah, there will have to be some equity, or, yeah.
Right. And even considering cutting out the lowest tier of income from paying into the fund
That's
at
also
all.
on the
Exactly.
If you recall, part of the tension also from the last proposals was the fact that there would be thousands of people. I think that, as I remember, the number was something like 6,000 people who would be paying into the system, but based on the rules would have no possibility of collecting from it. And that was a major concern.
So we have our work cut out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, yeah.
Well, when I don't want to just think specifically of our charge in economic development, but you can count on us for some vice content as well, the cannabis market, sports betting, things that I think this committee consistently looks at after we do.
Yeah, I don't know about sports betting.
Oh, that hasn't come.
What we've done before just allowed it. If it's going to charge a fee, or if there's any revenue raised by it or from it, or any revenue is dedicated somewhere, well, that's a proposal.
Okay,
That would be the Senate Secretary and Leadership's comment.
okay. I don't know if those weren't features before, but those are all
No,
likely in the
I
bill.
think the last, yeah, I don't think one's ever made it out of, it's never made it here,
Oh, okay.
okay? The last
Well,
one I
get ready.
remember was the Dream Team, and then
The
that's when
fantasy
I was
football.
on there, yeah.
Yeah.
And then sports betting was coming up and was getting a fairly favorable hearing,
Yeah.
and then COVID hit.
Perhaps because of the task force we had, the unanimous
Yes,
vote on the report. We are drafting something that I won't try to use chair's prerogative, but I anticipate having the support of a majority of our members this time and more agreement from outside stakeholders.
Before, issues have always arisen in the governor's office.
Right.
And it wasn't partisan. We just have had governors with different opinions about the appropriateness of using gambling to fund government. And sometimes you just work your way through that.
Yeah, I think this, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but it's not a lot of money. And it might be the first time that we can adequately fund problem gambling as a mental health issue. We haven't had a great deal of money go toward that, and this might be the way to do that.
Anything gets money in the mental health system.
It's interesting compared to when I was a kid, all these things we talked about, like gambling and drugs and et cetera, would have been handled by the Vice Squad. And now they're part of mainland government.
And I think that's what slowed down a few governors. We also had issues with alternatives to drugs and medically assisted, because we were switching one addictive medicine for another, and our governor happened to be a doctor and didn't think that was a good thing to do. And it took a while for that to make its way through.
You mentioned the magic word.
Governor?
Well,
Drugs?
3 minutes ago, you said fee.
Fee.
So we haven't seen a fee bill in
Nope.
6 years.
Really?
So I don't know if that's sort of on the table for discussion. I know that, it is when we inquired about it in Elkhart, because we saw a fee actually as part of a
Yes,
rule.
and a few of us raised that
And it's like, wait, we
concern
haven't
that the
seen
governor
a
was
fee
doing
change
it.
for
Yeah.
5 years at
I
that
hadn't
point.
realized
but
that.
All of a sudden this one,
This
and
one.
it turns, so we looked into it a little bit. It turns out the governor, as required by law, files a report each year saying if we need to increase fees in any particular area. So they've always done that, but the conclusion has been that the answer is no, we don't need. But a number of people have wondered what the impact of no fee increases cumulatively for operating areas, given just normal inflation that drives up the cost of running an agency.
I mean,
and
yeah, I
no
mean,
fees getting adjusted while, and supposedly those fees pay for the work of the agency. So I don't know how they can drift further and further apart without causing some problem.
and the place I think we'll see it first is motor vehicles. I'm assuming that they're saving some money by doing a whole lot of stuff online, but they're state employees and they're getting the same state employee salary and benefits raises that others are, and pension costs and all the rest of it. And at some point, you do need so many bodies, and that's when the public might understand that fees are not necessarily a bad thing. Your choice is, you can pay $2 more for your license, or you can sit here for 2 hours longer. I mean,
Well, this is a pretty simple, I won't say simple, but this is a data exercise
yeah,
of looking at what the agency's cost is compared to the fees being brought in over time. And you ought to be able to at least get a sense of what's going on. Now, on the other hand, the notion that the agency say we're becoming much more efficient and less labor intensive than we have in the past. I remember Global Foundries was the classic example in which it was in the case of fee increases or price increases for them over time, they were being required by their markets to reduce the price of their services and the goods they produced year in and year out over time, which I thought was a very interesting model as a result.
And it's, I mean, Act 250 fees are supposed to, because pay for the Act 250 whole regulatory thing, because most of us don't use the Act 250 system. And so it either gets funded through fees, or it's going to get funded through a budget somewhere, or it's not gonna get funded. And not having done a fee bill, it would be nice if we could work with the administration to do that kind of a data thing to see, you know, what do their budgets look like? Because all of these things, I'm assuming we're saving a lot of mileage at the state because you can Zoom yourself to Chittenden County. You know, we're gonna, there's a lot of change has happened, and assessing if it's good, if it's bad, we've got that ahead of us.
Well, it also though, just provides the opportunity as we look at things to be asking, what are you doing to make yourself more efficient and less costly? Business and industry have to do this all the time, and government ought to be doing it as well.
As I recall, there was at least a rotation where certain agencies were eligible to come forward.
Yeah, there was
Has
a
it-
3-year cycle,
Yeah.
and certain agencies got done. You could look at your fees every 3 years unless there was some huge emergency, but,
Is that even the understanding of the rotation still in place? So
No, there's
certain-
nothing.
There's nothing.
There
It comes
hasn't-
forward
yeah.
in a rotation and say, we don't need anything.
So, you know, to date, but COVID sat in the middle and everything pretty much shut down.
Down, yeah.
Well, no, since before COVID, we haven't been doing it.
Yes. Yeah, we have it.
I want to correct an old mistake of mine. I thought that rotation was in statute. I thought that was.
The rotation may be, but I believe, like the budget, it is the governor's responsibility, because it's his responsibility to manage government,
Yeah.
to put the fee bill together.
So have they just not been doing it?
They haven't been doing it.
They do it, they just put in the number,
Right.
the same number as the year before.
Zero.
They have to file a report.
They review it and they decide there's no.
There
increase.
has not been, yeah, with the exception of state parks, which is allowed by law to increase their fees. So the governor didn't object to, that was what you got on Elkhart. I picked it up, and Janet Ansel also picked it up, and we said, "Oh, I don't have any problem with them doing it, but it should be noted that the administration is letting this fee increase go through and not the others."
Not doing fees is a policy decision.
Yes.
Yeah, it is, and
Oh.
we could choose, I think it's just a matter of, we haven't had a crisis to make it worth anybody's while to pick that fight with the administration. We've got,
Oh, the various agencies are paying their way with their fees?
I don't know.
Well, I know that Natural Resources Board runs a deficit of 600,000 or so a year. So we've made them whole and actually put them back into the black, but then it didn't take very long to have that drain and be back into red
In the general fund.
from the general. fund.
Yeah, that's what, it'll go into the budgetary general fund process. And that means that all the taxpayers in the state are paying for that service that only some are using. But you can say that about childcare or, you know, anything else. Is there a social contract? And, you know, I pay to take care of your kids when they're young, and then you pay to take care of me when I'm old. And that's, is there a social contract or are we all just individuals? And that's part of what we're all fighting about.
That's why I love this committee.
No, this committee has not been fighting in this state as much as the rest of the country.
Well, that's fair. I just love when we get to the biggest topic possible around society and how we raise money.
We do. Because, yeah, that's how you
social
make,
contract.
determine that is who pays.
Exactly.
And those are the decisions we make.
So I would, I want to make sure it doesn't sound like I'm disagreeing with anything you're saying. The idea of government being more efficient makes a great deal of sense. It's not just fees for the sake of, if we had a tradition of increasing them reliably, that begs the question why. So maybe there's no need, but the data you're talking about could be helpful.
Well, and, sorry. It always irked me on Ways and Means when a digital fee was higher than a in-person fee. And it was because the portal system was able to charge their own fee, and it felt like it wasn't incentivizing moving to a digital space when that would be more efficient and should ultimately cost less. So I always struggled with our digital fees.
You just tweaked my memory. Several times now, the House has sent us a cloud tax.
That was
Late in
I was
May.
the first person to work on that.
Late, yeah, and we have never, we took some testimony once
Yeah.
many years ago, but we have never had the time to sit down and actually look at it. And I told Representative Kornheiser, if she got us a bill before May, that we would seriously look at it. But I think what I'm trying to do is just schedule some informational testimony early on while we've got a little space. When we started, only 2 states had done it. Now it's 20 something, so it's up to probably at this point 50% of the states do it. It is taxes follow the money, and it is where a lot of the money is. And if we can figure out how to tax Bitcoin,
What is
That might be a losing proposition.
I don't know, I'm old like you, but it's somewhere you have money on the internet.
Or don't
And just-
anymore.
Yeah, just as somebody you don't. Yeah.
So
It's digital money.
it's like taxing the cloud itself.
Yes, it is digital money. You probably can pay the cloud in Bitcoin. That's the kind of stuff we're gonna start with.
It's not a coin. Based on the full safe and credit of the internet.
Or the founder who is now
No,
going,
jail.
or is pleading innocent, but he's probably going to jail.
We traditionally tax economic activity,
Yeah,
and Bitcoin is
is
that
an
an
economic
economic
activity.
activity.
And I talked to Emily Kasicki, who's our liaison person from DFR. And she said both in Washington and in the state, everybody agrees that the potential for abuse is really real and that there needs to be some regulation. But there still, is this a security? Do you tax it, or regulate it like you regulate stock? Or is this banking? Or they said it is so new, they're still trying to figure out on all levels, how do we get control? But if you can sit in your kitchen and buy things that are totally unregulated, the risk for abuse is pretty bad. You weren't on economic development. We did dating things, and the woman that twice gave this guy $7,500.
Oh gosh, I've seen Netflix specials about.
Oh,
stuff like that.
there were some really sad stories. And yeah,
Yeah, and then, it sounds sort of fantastical, like why would you mess with this stuff? But I think in New York State or New York City, they started allowing you to get your payroll paid through Bitcoin.
mhm.
That was like a high level sort of flashy thing with the arrival of another administration. I'm not sure, in the last year or so.
I remember seeing that.
So, I worry about real people ending up with less than paper money.
Yeah.
Or less than secured money.
Yeah.
I mean, at least supposedly there's some form of wealth behind those nickels and dimes and dollars. Or there's some guarantee of security behind stocks and bonds and insurance. You have to have enough in reserve to cover all your insurance claims and
Regulation.
I know,
People
But,
should be free to go out and do what they want. If your
okay,
citizen isn't wise enough, that's their problem.
so.
I don't know, Senator Chittenden knows you're gonna
No,
learn if you.
Senator McDonald is an acquired sense of humor. Yeah, read The Boys from Biloxi. And the hurricanes and the insurance companies that did not pay up.
Maybe we'll get another weird category of asset these days is non-fungible art. You know, it's like the digital representation of something that has some sort of unique quality to it so that it can't be replicated theoretically, but you only sort of own the rights to a digital piece of art.
Which
and
you
people are
can't hang
selling
over your
things
sofa unless
for
I get projected.
It's not like $10 pieces. This is like people buying things for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and that's been good. That was pre-Marvel recent political cards. That I read about a year or two ago was one of the newest hot investments. And if you were an artist, you could put your work up there and people could buy a copy.
So I don't know how the state tracks anything. I don't know if that kind of transactions ever happen in Vermont, but. You know,
Well, I'm sure it has.
Right.
how you collect the sales tax on
Right.
that.
Well, that'll be interesting to talk to the tax department about.
That's kind
Commissioner
of cloud
Bolio.
tangential.
Yeah. Is Commissioner Bolio still Commissioner Bolio?
Yeah, as far as I know, he sent me an email text the other day. Asking me if I had decided my position on watchers. And I'd forgotten until she was here the other day, the tax department had a woman that's job was to sit in here and watch us. Her name was Deb. And she was here, and I said, right now, my position on watchers is they can watch us on Zoom.
Sounds like a better deal for
They
them.
can sit in a much better chair and not risk COVID. I
Can
mean,
even make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich if they need to.
That sounds nice.
Definitely interested to hear and confirm that we are in fact collecting taxes when things are paid for with cryptocurrency. So I have an understanding of what cryptocurrency has originally started from, which is to avoid a lot of regulations. And it's useful for me to know if people are paying for things with cryptocurrency, are they paying 6% sales tax? Just like the Wayfair ruling, I'd love the commissioner to clarify how we're ensuring that things purchased within the United States and Vermont with cryptocurrency are paying their dues.
so that'll be, I've written it down, remind me to look at my notes. A question to get, because I think I'd like to have the tax commissioner come in, just introduce himself. He's very jolly, very personable.
Yeah.
And likes to make the tax department user friendly, and I think that is a very good thing.
One issue on taxes that I would raise, that we may raise with Commissioner Boyle again, and that is when there's an overcharge of taxation,
Yeah.
how do we have any assurance that the consumer is protected? And how does the consumer know that he or she has been overcharged? And to give you an example, Tractor Supply has a store that's physically located in Swanton, just across the line from St. Albans Town. St. Albans Town has a 1% tax increment on the sales tax, and Swanton does not. For years, Tractor Supply was charging 7% tax, although they were only allowed to charge 6%. It came to my attention after some constituents had brought it to me, that they had spoken to the store previously, if they hadn't done anything. I advised the tax commissioner, and I also wrote a letter to the CEO of Tractor Supply. Several weeks later, the tax rate dropped to 6%, which was the proper percent. But it's unclear if any taxpayers who had overpaid were made whole,
That's
one,
right.
because of the confidentiality relationship. Second, there's not an effective mechanism that the tax department has for a consumer to be made whole. There are forms that allow the business to recover taxes that they have overpaid, but there's no form or procedure in writing to allow a consumer to collect tax that he or she has paid and overpaid. Although they indicated they would do something if some consumer.
I think it's,
But how would the consumer even find out?
yeah, I think that was it, how, there's no record,
And that
unless you
still
pay
has not
for the
been
charge
resolved.
card, no, I got.
But by my calculation, if I took the average dollar volume of sales of a Tractor Supply store, multiplied it by 1%, by the number of years that they've been doing this, I think I came up with somewhere around $500,000 in taxes that Vermonters have overpaid to that particular store because of their revenue. The question is, we don't have a mechanism.
I wonder, yeah,
I was
No.
actually, oh, sorry.
Did they remit that money?
Well, I don't know, because I can't find out, because again, that's confidential, which is another issue that I raised with them as well.
I was gonna raise actually the exact same issue because people may know Burlington is in litigation over very well recorded charges for the rooms and meals tax
Mhm.
on Airbnb stays longer than 30 days, where they were collecting what rooms and meals tax on what should have been a regular rental agreement. And there's litigation right now that I'm trying to follow because that money is not owed to the renters and the hosts, it's owed to the guests.
to the guest.
And it's a very clear documented amount of money that's currently under litigation that will be hundreds of thousands of
And
dollars.
since most of those are done online and paid with credit cards, it would be easier to trace them
Mhm.
down than
Mhm.
the folks that come in and give you $10 cash at Tractor Supply for
Right.
something, and
And that money shouldn't sit with Airbnb or go to anybody, but
No.
directly to the consumers.
okay, so
What
Yeah.
that gives us some
A lot of those electronic
little
transactions,
broader.
money goes
Okay.
quickly.
We do get refunds for overpayments of income tax.
Yes,
It's the sales tax. Rooms and meals is kind of sales tax.
yeah, they know who you are with your income.
Mhm.
But they don't know who every guest in a hotel or a restaurant or who every shopper is, and
In a
so,
retail facility.
yeah, how do you get that
Yeah.
amount of money? It could easily cost more to get it back than,
Course, who?
The
well,
victim.
probably costs, I don't know, probably the tax department. If they have to hire someone to search for everyone or trace down everyone who bought anything in any store in the last 5 years, it could be very expensive. It's just everybody that paid with a credit card.
Well,
Um,
Tractor Supply sends all its customers a list of what they bought and what they paid for, it, what sales tax.
They do.
Yes, they do.
I
They
must
do
not
it,
shop
they
at
do it,
Tractor
they do it
Supply.
in January of every year, and then they have a disclaimer that says you shouldn't use this for your income tax purposes.
Tractor Supply, does that, is that the people who are registered with them?
Customers,
I'm a customer, I don't get anything like that.
you get a mailing every year,
No.
what this many pellets, what this many,
Is it because
You're
you're
a
a registered
farmer.
farmer?
That's what
You're
it's
a
for.
farmer.
no, pellets, tools.
I don't think Randy buys pellets. I
You
don't
don't
buy
have a, you don't
Tractor
have a pellet
Supply.
stove?
No.
Ways and means.
You buy Carhartt jackets, those things will.
Taxes get
I know
very
you don't.
personal very
Yeah.
quickly.
You left them all, they, yeah, but
Okay,
they,
so we
They
got other
shouldn't have.
issues to look at when we get some
Sure,
downtime. But yeah, the how do we refund it? We fixed last year, right? I'm remembering. You pay more in interest to the state if you are delinquent in your taxes, then the state pays you in return, and we got that
Yep.
fixed. That's been around for a few
Remember that.
years.
you may pay more if it's discretion.
we fixed it, whatever, but the standard was it was 1% differential. We fixed that. Okay, any other issues that might come up in here? We're gonna have enough. Anybody that would like, because I got kind of a mixed bag, I'm gonna take the big ones like the property tax system, which we can all use a refresher on. I think we've got enough time. They're gonna do the income tax and then talk a little bit about the recommendations from the income tax study, i.e. Income Education Tax Committee, IETs. We came up with a system, but the first thing said, what we did not determine and did not even look at is should we do it? It's if we decide to do it, this is what we suggest it look like. I think I can say it is not really simpler. There's just different different confusions, but the whole issue and the big one is impact on the general fund and its ability to raise money to do other things like childcare. So those were not discussed.
How or if is that integrated anyway with the work of the Tax Structure Commission?
They recommended it.
Yeah, but is whatever report from this, is that the end result taking into account what the Tax Structure Commission came up with?
Yes. I mean, this was their recommendation.
Mhm.
This refines it. This started with, I remember, the thing was, well, why don't we just bump income sensitivity up higher? That raises the base on everybody else at the top. And that graph went like that. Still, it didn't get the kind of, it's almost flat, but a very gradual, increase in the end without any major shocks. So we went to a graduated income and a graduated rate. We have withholding, which just assumed that all employers can, and your tax will vary on whether or not your town spends more or less than last year's average per pupil spending. And it can't go into effect until probably 2030 because we're phasing in weighting. And we don't know what impact weighting is going to have. So again, we have suggestions, but the base, should we do it, issue was not worked on.
Your children will be in college
I-
before this is settled.
So we're waiting until 2030.
Well, no, we can decide we should do it, but the common wisdom was you don't put two major funding changes. There's gonna be some major, I'm already going to Barry at 7 a.m. on Monday, and what they want to talk about is, and I spent hours, Barry, who is my poorest school, has, the most social problems, everything is, and they for years thought they were being undercounted for poverty and well, they're holding flat, but U32, which is my wealthiest town, is going up.
More poverty.
No, more rural. Barry's a city, it's not rural.
Oh, so more dollars.
And we made the merge, and I didn't think we would, the high school was already merged, we made a merge. The cultural arts are being bought out on that school board. But Barry Town put enough money in, so, but Barry Town won't spend its money. It's the culture wars being worked out over there, but I spent hours trying. I said, I'm gonna have to explain it to them, and this is just counterintuitive. They think they're gonna make out big time. And unless we get a lot of non-English speaking refugees in there, they aren't. They do have a fair refugee population, but
And now I've been out of this discussion for a few years, and so have we somehow escaped the trap of the three-legged stool? The last time I was really in the middle of this discussion, you only tax three things. You got income tax, property tax, and sales tax. And whatever you do to bring one down, it's gonna put a burden on the others. Income tax is certainly the most just, but this is a Republican argument that I've never been able to rebut, which is that the income tax has a point of diminishing returns.
Well, this is
And
where,
that-
yeah,
Okay, so there's a limit to how much you can put off on the income tax. Similarly, the sales tax, Mark and I are the only ones in this committee who deal directly with that. We're on the east side. But there's like almost no retail in Vermont, on the east side of Vermont. It's all-
side of
It's all in.
yeah.
To bring up Tractor Supply again,
Yeah,
they just put a store on the Vermont side of the river instead of the New Hampshire side of the river.
what do they think?
Brand new store.
What do they think?
They thought it was good business.
Well, but anyway, what I'm getting at is, it seems to me, for 30 years, we've been dealing with school taxes are ruinously high. How do we get them down? And
I still think if we paid them in
It's the adjectives.
installments, and they were withheld, it wouldn't be the issue it is.
I would withdraw ruinous and replace it with two.
I just want to make 2 points.
Those are.
Okay, guys.
200.
Picking up on what you just said, Senator McCormick, I attended the 12 lunch today in the House chamber. There was a presentation on our tax sources, and they said those three, and then there was another one, a really small one, which ties back to our earlier conversation, which is fees. And so I think it's important that as we stagnate on the fees, is putting more pressure on the rest of the budget. So I think it's well worth our time to look at fees. The other piece, I am working on a bill that I don't think will land here, but it ties into what you're talking about here, which has to do with the 1% options tax that communities can charge. All I'm going to be proposing to do is to make it so that communities that pass not necessarily a charter change, but pass it by their voters to enact a 1% additional local options tax, to not have to go through the legislature as well. Because with the Wayfair ruling, there's a lot of online sales that are going to people out in the countryside not paying that 1% that you have to pay if you picked it up in South Burlington. So I think it might be a way to make it easier for communities to generate some revenues to pay for their roads and other costs for me.
We drafted the same bill.
Oh, great.
You're welcome to take the lead. You can tell Tucker. I can't remember.
That's right, when they can't tell you. The other,
I just
well,
gave permission.
the other thing is that both income and sales are volatile.
Yes, I know that's where you're
Tied
going,
to the
right.
federal, the economy.
Yeah.
And right now, they are the main taxes in the education system. We've had education on property because property stays
Stable.
stable over time.
I mean, acres don't get any smaller.
Yeah. And, we've got some buffers for ups and downs, we've got rolling averages and change, but we have been through a depression with this, or recession with this new system. It's also quite clear that there isn't a town out there that couldn't use more money. So if we take out the school tax, the towns are gonna raise their tax. Their tax is regressive. The education tax is tiered, it's got some income base, not perfect. If you're the local, Barry's city tax is higher than the school tax. And it hits a couple of small cities that, I wouldn't be surprised if Rutland wasn't there, because they're running fire, police, ambulance. And, a bigger government, but the schools aren't spending very much. And so if the towns take up that property tax, we're losing something in progressivity. So those are all little issues that popped up. There will be a bill, I'm pretty sure it's starting in the House. If it makes it this far, we'll take it out. And if I have my way, we'll find something like feminine hygiene products to hook it to.
Always a winner.
Thinking about it.
Oh,
in my absence, did the committee look at, because remember years ago, we had talked about this, the redefining what we mean by property.
That's-
Because we use the word property tax interchangeable with real estate tax.
Yes,
And there are other kinds of property.
I think that's what New Hampshire does. They tell me you don't want to own a boat or a car in New Hampshire.
Just taxing wealth.
Yeah, well, that's how do you get to what, I'm sure we're gonna have a bill taxing second homes. Or doing, dividing out that non-homestead property, because they're all-
Unoccupied homes.
whatever, and how we leave out the deer camp, I don't know, but, the unoccupied homes are going up like all homes. Commercial real estate is not, and it never has gone up at the rate that residential property has. And so, why do we have the same tax rate on both of them? They do float there, we have set up so it rises with school spending kind of stuff, but.
Well, New Hampshire taxes your car every year.
And
whereas
your boat,
Vermont taxes your car when you buy it.
right, and that's a sales tax, yeah. And they, I'm told, do that to your boat
Yeah.
or other luxuries you may own.
Sales tax, right?
We do.
No, they understand, and they don't have an income tax, but they get a lot of tolls.
In colonial days, there was a.
You talk about
That was-
that was what I needed there.
We've tried it. So far, the answer is going to be cost more than we make, but
The technology.
If New Hampshire were to institute an income tax, it would be tens, depending on how high it was, would be, Vermont's revenues would take a big hit.
Yeah.
Big hit.
because we collect from all of those Vermonters that work at places like Garden Fishcott.
Okay.
If your state doesn't charge an income tax, and we make them from.
New Hampshire would collect.
New
would
Hampshire
collect
would collect their residents. Right now, we collect
Yeah.
from, Vermont residents who work in New Hampshire. And we would not collect that if New Hampshire were collecting it because the work is done there. And that's where it'd be interesting to get a report, or have Commissioner Bolio come in, on the remote worker tax. Because they're residents of Massachusetts, and Massachusetts was trying to crack down because so many people live in New Hampshire and work in Massachusetts, and everybody's trying to protect their end, and supposedly you pay your taxes in Massachusetts, but then get a credit for the taxes that you earned while you were staying here, and you owe those taxes here.
Against you.
Yeah, but how we know that, I don't know. Because it's never been that big an issue, but it'll be something we need to follow up on and see how that's going.
I don't know what a good time, Chair, is for me. I just want to talk about my absence next week.
Good.
So I already told Senator Cummings, as well as all transportation and leadership, of course, but I still work at UVM, and I have an unavoidable obligation that's gonna have me be absent all next week. I apologize in advance. I promise to watch the YouTubes, maybe a double time, but I want you to know that after next week, I am not teaching this semester, and I won't be on city council after the end of February. So I'm gonna be very, very present and working, focused on staying up to speed on all of these things. I just apologize in advance for missing next week. I don't have a choice because of my work obligation.
We have a citizen
legislature.
Make it very hard for the citizens to work. Unless they're farmers and this is their downtown.
Farmers don't work.
Farmers don't work. True, they're all gentlemen farmers.
No, the machinery does all.
Oh, okay. You got a remote tractor, do you?
Pardon?
You have a remote tractor?
Oh, so good.
You sit there?
Just sit there. Does all the work.
Okay. So that means if I've got a shovel, I'm working harder than you are, right?
I would hope so.
right?
There's a video of me driving a tractor at the age of 4. Because my father's cousin is running right next to me, ready to grab the wheel.
Okay, anything else, any questions?
Well, there were just a couple things that came up in economic development when you had to step out
Okay,
that I want to make sure I say out loud here, if they are more jurisdiction here, or if they start there, kind of like with natural resources. Pat Titterton said that he has written what he calls his opus on the earned income tax credit and wants to share that with us, but I don't know if that's an opus that's for this audience first.
The what tax credit?
Earned income tax credit.
Or
So that's come up, and then, of course, they did also think we should look parallel at the shadow budget, the tax incentives.
oh,
And
yes.
so I don't know when, if we have a schedule on which we look at what we used to call the shadow budget.
Yeah, well, no, we had the problem with your morning and we're afternoon,
Yeah,
but yeah, it would be taking away from. But half of us are
I
there
know, so I don't know how you want to
anyway.
be.
So.
We could
but
start it
that's
there and narrow
good,
it down.
Because I hadn't heard anything
Yeah.
about Patrick and
That may be when JFO comes in, they may want to, I mean, I think he's very proud of it, and he wants to share it with whoever
well,
will.
good, anybody
We'll
does
see
that
it.
much. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll get that on the list too. Before things get crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we up that's the other thing, we don't know as we're going into this. And maybe I've got, e-board is on the 17th, where we will get the revenue figures that our budget will be based on. We don't, and probably, we may get some idea by early returns and withholding, but we did the biggest thing of tax credits last year that's ever been done. The biggest one was the child tax credit. And then the income tax credit went up. We did the state match to the federal dependent care tax credit. We did a few things, monkey pension tax credits.
Wasn't there one for veterans?
We allowed veterans and federal employees.
Employees.
We raised the
nice.
level,
Civil
yeah,
servants.
with,
Federal civil.
yeah, federal civil servants who until 1987 did not pay income tax. Their federal, they don't get social security, they get their pension includes social security, they get a nice pension, but they didn't have anything withheld. We exempt up to, I think we're up to $90,000 a couple in income. Up to that, your social security is deducted, and slightly less for individuals. And we, according to JFO, took the same dollar amount that you would be saving, which was around $250 per person, and set that up as a tax credit for both military pensions and STC. I think we took care of railroad workers one other time, but our goal was to get everybody got the same, nobody got preferential or nobody was hurt, that everybody was on an equal playing field when we came to income that was disregarded. And we'll find out how that, but we don't know how all these tax credits are going to play out yet with impacting the revenue. And we probably won't know until after April, when the returns are in and, it's tabulated. So we will be either home or on our way home before we have a real handle on that.
I'm wondering if Commissioner Bolio has a housekeeping bill that big.
He hasn't told, well, no, they always have a miscellaneous tax bill. If nothing else, we have to vote to align ourselves with the federal AGI every year. There's a few other things. So if they were gonna withhold it, they would have done it before now because it is our Christmas tree. And they know it, but, as far as I know, they have one, that one always starts in the house because it's a revenue thing, so.
So likely be asking for, all military pensions non-taxable. Again.
I'm assuming it will,
But,
I'm assuming,
oh, yeah.
just like I'm assuming Lenny Tiff's is gonna come back.
You have your hand in that now.
We've got to figure out a way to help those towns without money, I'm just not sure that the TIF is it.
They might like local option tax even better.
I mean, well, then I know what taxes are, outsiders don't
That's
come in and out.
And if they have a small village
Yeah.
center.
Yeah, but I'm concerned they could get themselves in over their heads. So we will see where it goes, and this committee, at my behest, my TIFs were a big part of my master's thesis. And when we got here, every town came in and got their own TIF, and it was basically Georgia and several sections of Burlington and Winooski, and they all had separate TIFs, and they all had separate rules, and they all had, and said, no, this needs to be standardized, and we set up the standardized TIFs thing, so everybody is operating under the same rules. I'm the only money chair that likes TIFs.
That's,
Except I know by
that's
Emily, Emily's me.
Now we know the basis of it. You wrote your thesis. I never
It was,
knew that.
no, TIFs came in, who said this morning when they were introducing themselves? Oh, Wendy, and she lived in, and everybody was fleeing the city and it was urban flight. And TIFs were a way that you could revitalize the city and not charge your general taxpayers to pay for the fancy street lights that the art museum wanted and the new water and new sewer that they needed in order to put the museum or the sports center or whatever downtown. And they
Sewer
were,
system.
yeah, the sewer system,
Some parking lots.
it varied, but
Streetlights.
yeah, and the argument was the people in that district, the businesses essentially would benefit the most, and therefore they should foot the cost. And it worked, and it had really good potential here until our statewide school tax messed it up. Because then school taxes were local property taxes. So we worked through that. But it's not a system for everybody. We need to find a
That's a
system.
succinct thesis, in fact, actually, that's quite good. The succinct thesis,
Well, the chair and I disagree. I wasn't gonna be equally succinct on
Right.
the issue at this time.
You reserve your right.
Hartford is experiencing a problem. I bet they're not the only town with this, which is that when you get the TIFs arrangement, there's a schedule that you're supposed to have all the project, the improvements
Yes,
done by,
yes.
and COVID set
Did you
us
say
back.
Windsor?
Hartford.
Oh, Hartford. Windsor came in, same thing, we extended it. They can come in and COVID, I think we need to recognize, shut everything down. And tell, they can appeal to the legislature if all else fails.
Bennington got an extension.
All right.
We'll see.
Thank you. I have a meeting of the Film and Industry Task Force at 3:00.
The film,
Film and Media Industry Task Force.
Oh, good.
Report back.
We shouldn't have gotten jealous of Don Johnson making money and extended that income tax. They haven't done a film here since. We nailed Don Johnson on purpose. His name was attached to it. They didn't like that.
We stood on principle.
We taxed the income you earned here.
It's only money. We stood on principle.
We taxed the
And
income
we
you
haven't
earned
had
here.
a film here, and, you know, sometimes there's cutting off your nose to spite your face.
No, that was Cat Baloo.
Yes, it was.
At Baloo.
Oh, it's a great movie. Jane
The
Fonda,
guy's
Lee
nose was
Marvin.
cut off. He had a silver nose.
That was Lee
Never
Marvin.
heard of it.
It's a very funny movie. Okay. I think we're done.
Are we
I
done?
will see you here on Tuesday at 1:30. Who we got at 1:30?
Julie, I'm right there, and you.
We're doing property
Yeah.
taxes.
Oh, good.
It's always good to have a refresher course on how that, because it is a complicated system. but The system with income tax schools and income tax work on very different calendar years, how do you,
I remember
yeah, and withholding and lining, yeah, it's not gonna be that simple.
When I was a freshman in the House, at some point, sort of somewhat exasperated by the educational tax system, I was talking to Speaker Symington, and I said, it's too bad that we don't have a system that we can explain to voters more easily, because that would be helpful. They'd know why they're paying what they're paying. And she very patiently looked at me and said, you can have a good tax or you can have a simple tax.
Exactly.
You probably can't have both.
I would say we're the most complex tax system, but we have one of the fairest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was Janet Ansel, they asked her that on Kinzel on the radio. She said, well, unfortunately, the minute you try and get fair, it gets complicated.
Well, some of us remember when Act 60 was being written, and it was fairly simple. And then this objection came up, so this little modification, and that objection came up, so another modification.
This
Yeah.
is also sausage making at its finest.
But even, I wouldn't even say sausage, it was a matter of being responsive to the complaints.
To concerns, yeah.
Making it work for everybody.
And again, it was a Supreme Court mandate.
could apply to any law. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
good law or a simple law. It's the same in housing.
Simple
or-
solutions for every problem.
And they're wrong.
They're usually wrong.
Is that Winston Churchill? I think that might be Winston Churchill.
Just that Senator Rockin has a drawer there. I would see if he has anything.
I
That's
think,
like a,
Jill, did you clean those out?
I can't remember who said it.
Yeah. Well,
That's
he
like,
was told it was being thrown out. We cleaned
Right,
out, we
exactly.
cleaned out your drawer.
Oh, yay.
We filled a box. Oh, there's more in there?
It's Mark, those are
That's
some,
my other drawer.
Oh, that's your other drawer.
there's a lemon and some black pills. I feel like I'm in Alice in Wonderland.
The next drawer.
That's-
Oh, I was,
The
oh,
seats
okay.
don't
you have
line
two
up
drawers.
with
Got
the
it, got
drawers.
it, okay.
I think this is my
The black
drawer,
pills
only I
are
don't
for
use it.
males.
Because I
Okay.
can't get,
Touching them.
it's not helpful to have my pens in the drawer. I need them.
No, you could, no, that's right. I have one here. I didn't realize that I don't even use it that often. And it's exciting. I'll steal your
So
lemon.
next week, there might be some downside. I'm not saying we're gonna try to either.
Oh, it's not
in case
available?
In case you're getting
watch
calls.
on YouTube.
Okay,
Oh.
just drop a note to Jill, and she can just
It's nice.
let you in.
Yeah, I'll send you the invite for all this.
Yeah, I still probably need
One
that.
year, I might have to leave really quickly. I apologize again. I'm
No.
terrible at missing next week. I just.
It happens.
It would be a lot worse at the end of the
That's
session
right.
when
That's
we're making
exactly
decisions.
right. Yeah.
Cleared my schedule.
Good.
Alright.
I wish I could guarantee that.
If there's anything.
My husband doesn't have to have hand surgery,
Nice
I'll be
and
okay.
clean.
But last year I had to take him up to the hospital and pick him up. Yeah, I'm sitting here waiting for them to call.
Are we still laughing?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We're recording.
Yes,
Okay.
okay. I
He
will
was still
regularly
live and I
forget that because it's new, so Jess,